Yes, but between the two committees, there's only 4 members. Yeah. So there's 3 present. So I think you. Oh yeah, I think in that way. We'll call this meeting to order. This is a meeting of the joint subcommittees, housing and zoning. Mr. Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Council Yem?
Yes.
Council Drinkwater?
Here.
Council Noon?
Here.
Council Leahy?
On his way.
One absent.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I also want to note that we have Councilor Eric Gitchier in attendance here in the chamber, as well as Christine McCall, Assistant City Manager and Director of Department of Planning and Development, as well as Francesca Sigliano from the Department of Planning and Development. Thank you all for being here. I will try to move this along quickly because I recognize there are a number of members of the public who are here to speak tonight, and I want to make sure we have a chance to get to everybody who wants to speak on this. So we are here to discuss a motion that was approved by the City Council, filed by Councilor Robinson and myself, to begin conversations around zoning and accessory dwelling units with a focus on potential increase in housing stock. So I've had a chance to speak a little bit on this motion at the City Council meeting. So in the interest of brevity, I will move it along and just extend the opportunity to my co-chair, Councilor Yem, if you have any opening words you'd like to offer.
Just thank you for co-chair this together. It's an important, and thanks to the public for being here. It is time that we need to discuss ADU because of the shortage of housing in the city of Lowell, and this is the perfect timing to do. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We also have other committee members. Councilor Noon.
I'm all set, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Councilor Kitchen, and nothing at the moment. Great. Well, just to start off, I would like to offer the opportunity for Christine McCall just to give a little bit of an overview of what accessory dwelling units are and kind of the current landscape within the zoning code for if someone in Lowell wanted to add on an accessory unit to their home. So if you wouldn't mind, Ms. McCall, maybe just giving a brief overview.
Sure. Thank you, Councilor. Through you to everyone, to the council, the subcommittee. DPD has been involved in a number of planning and zoning initiatives internally related to housing production. I think we can all agree that there is a housing crisis, both on the number of units available, but also price. Some of the things that we have been working on is a transit-oriented development overlay district. We're hoping to start showing the public and start talking about some options there. I think this council is aware that we are really motivated to be in compliance with that new law so that we can maintain eligible for state funding that we use for a number of our projects. We're also embarking on an update to our master plan, Resilient Lowell 2040, which we're in the process of finalizing the contract with the consultant, and then we'll be launching a steering committee and hopefully being able to kick off that project, which we anticipate to take 2 years this summer. In addition, we were approached, the city works very closely with CTI and has been on a number of issues, but in the past year for on homeless related issues, especially as it relates to individual adults. And they approached us, CHAPA, which is a Citizens Housing and Planning Association, has a municipal engagement initiative program where they provide technical assistance to help communities and constituents talk about housing. I think we can all agree housing is very complicated. It can be very contentious. We were not approved for the full MEI program, but we were approved for the MEI Lite. And so CTI has been coordinating, has been sort of the lead, but trying to coordinate a group of Lowell residents that are interested in housing, and so how to work together to develop more housing, make more available units, affordable units. And one of the biggest topics that came out of that group is accessory dwelling units, and we have very limited availability for ADUs in the city. Right now, currently, ADUs are only permitted in the urban neighborhood single family, the USF, and it's only allowed by special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals, and it's subject to lot area per dwelling unit requirements. We do not, I cannot recall, and I don't believe Ms. Sigliano has any records of, in the last 7 years, of someone applying for an ADU under this special permit. The USF is one of our smaller zoning districts. I think everyone is well aware we have 2 major suburban single-family zoning districts in this neighborhoods that are predominantly suburban single-family, but we are a fairly dense, centrally located city. Most of our units are, multiple units are located in the center of the city. But ADUs in general is a dwelling unit contained within a single-family structure. It can be within the structure, within a cellar, an attic, an attached garage, a barn. It could be a new structure, which constitutes as separate living facilities as defined under all applicable provisions of the state building code. And an accessory dwelling unit is secondary to the principal dwelling in terms of the size, the scale, the intensity of the use, and the physical character. There are about, I don't know, I want to say 37 communities in Massachusetts that probably have some version of a pretty relaxed ADU ordinance, and then there's about an equal number of communities that have sort of temporary ADUs that are specifically for family members in a short-term use. Currently in the city of Lowell, if you are a homeowner and you want to create an accessory dwelling unit or a separate space within your home for a family member or for a relative, as long as you're in compliance, obviously, with the unrelated definition of family, you can, as long as the structure is an addition to the home, is dimensionally compliant with the zoning district of which the dwelling resides, is located. So in theory, you could come in and build a second unit. Well, I should be clear, 2 kitchens do not constitute two units. So there are multiple residential structures that will have multiple kitchens. We call it the Ernie Bach Jr. Law. I believe he had 6 in his home, and it was a single-family residence. We do think ADUs can be an option, potentially, if it's the will of the council, to consider to increase housing opportunities. We would really want to ensure that if this is something the council wanted to do, that, it would add to available housing units, supply and diversity of housing. Part of the reason why we're in such a housing crisis is lack of supply of all types of housing. We want to be able to meet the needs of smaller households, aging in place, making housing units available to households who might otherwise have difficulty finding housing. It can also be an opportunity to provide means for residents, seniors, single parents, families with grown children to remain in their homes and neighborhoods and obtain extra income, security, companionship. I mean, there's a number of benefits to ADUs. And then it also could encourage efficient use of our existing housing stock. We are a very aging city. There is a lot of pre-existing large accessory structures on a lot of single-family properties that could be better utilized for our larger needs as a community. But if the will of the council is for the DPD to draft an ordinance, we obviously want to be sensitive to our neighborhoods and our residents. We don't want to just build large secondary single-family homes in a backyard. I think there's a way to be thoughtful about the urban design so that it fits into the context of the neighborhood. And obviously, in some neighborhoods, a big concern would be parking, and if so, an ADU could incorporate dimensional requirements that could limit the size. Some communities grandfathered in existing structures, and all new structures would require a special permit. At a minimum, we do have a minor, allow ADUs by special permit in USF. You could expand that to be allowed in all single-family districts. That's an option. So yeah, we are here to listen and hear what residents may or may not be interested in, but we do think ADUs could be a potential option for the city to explore.
Great. Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. McCall? Okay. Hearing none. First, want to recognize that we've been joined by Councilors Robinson and Rourke in the chamber. Seeing that we have so many members of the public here to speak, I would like to get right into the public testimony. Before we get started, I just want to ask to ensure that everyone who has come here to speak, as well as a few that we have logged into Zoom, that speakers keep your comments limited to a maximum of 3 minutes, just to ensure we only have until 6:30 to get everyone's comments in. So if you could limit it to 3 minutes, I would please ask you to do so. And since it's a subcommittee meeting, we don't have a list of registered speakers, but any member of the public who is here and wishes to testify can. So at this point, I would just open the meeting up to any member of the public that wishes to testify. If anyone wants to jump up first. Oh, there we go. And I just ask that you please state your name and your address for the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, plural, and members of the City Council. My name is Jerry Frechette. I live at 80 Dunbar Ave. I'm currently the Vice Chair of the Planning Board here in the City of Lowell. And for the last 42 years, I have been and I am a banker in the City of Lowell, and a CRA officer, compliance officer, and I have dealt with large development for affordable housing, partnering with mass development. I have, for decades, personally done the home buyer training at the Merrimack Valley Housing Partnership and worked with other organizations such as CTI and some of the other organizations in the city, and with the Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston for Equity Builder Down Payment Fund. So I take affordable housing very, very seriously here in the City of Lowell. With that, in that capacity, I did attend on June 16th an interagency webinar. And what that is in the banking industry, it's the FDIC, the OCC, and the Federal Reserve Bank that conducted the seminar. This was nationwide. And ADUs are not unique right now. It's a hot topic for the Massachusetts and the City of Lowell. It's in the entire country. And there was a segment that I thought was valuable to this committee and to the residents here in the City of Lowell. And it was a section that was titled Zoning Considerations, and I will add in concerns. And these are the issues I think that this committee has to look at, the council has to look at, and I want to make sure the residents of the City of Lowell fully understand this issue. And I'm going to bullet item these. Would these be by right? Would they be conditional use, special permits? Would there be exceptions? Occupancy requirements, right? On the Cape, they require that they have to be long-term leases, so they don't turn into Airbnbs, right? That requires regulation, oversight. Parking requirements. What I will tell you, there was an FDIC officer from the New York district, quoting, parking is a hot topic. Communities require off-street parking. Add 1 or 2 cars by ADUs. Community by community. Do you have access to public transit? This is a decision that has to be looked at for community by community, neighborhood by neighborhood, zone by zone. The bulk requirement as it relates to how this sits on the lot. Entrance. Do you want to have it look like a two-family? Does it need to look like a single family to maintain the context of that dwelling within the neighborhood? Do you want to allow for detached, attached? Design requirements. Again, I'm a big proponent of density by design, but I will tell you the FDIC said they didn't particularly like that because it becomes more arbitrary. Minimum, maximum square footage, minimum lot size, and then most important, enforcement. And this was something, and Christine McCall can even speak to this, it came up at the public hearing at the Planning Board. This is not a comment on the efficiency or how good the enforcement officer here is in the city of Lowell. We have one zoning enforcement officer for 105,000 people. Has to be considered. And I think, and I want to thank you, Christine, for laying that out. I think all the councils need to understand, ADUs across the country, this is to create apartments. You can, if somebody couches this as an in-law apartment to you as a constituent, it's not being couched properly. You can build a separate unit as long as it's open and connected to your main dwelling. Christine explained it, and I'll tell you right now, anybody at home and a counselor here, you can Google it, and it's a Caldwell Banker, 4 Jennifer Road in Pawtucketville, the corner of Varnum Ave and Jennifer Road, $650,000 under agreement, has 2 kitchens, bedrooms, it's beautiful. Okay, so what I would say is that these are items and issues that have to be carefully considered, and I will tell you that, you know, there are other issues here. The housing choice legislation does tie grant money to ADUs. I understand there's bigger issues here as well, but I believe there has to be a comprehensive approach to the housing shortage, and we have opportunities in the downtown to create critical mass to support businesses. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Frechette. I'm going to just remind speakers of the time with my stopwatch here. I know it goes by quick, but just to keep us on time, I will be flashing the stopwatch to remind the speakers. So thank you. Welcome.
Hi.
Please state your name.
Thanks for having me. I did time myself in my office before I got here, so hopefully I'll stay within the time limit. My name is Claire Ricker. I live and work in Lowell. I live at 555 Andover Street. I'm also the real estate director for the Coalition for a Better Acre, CDC. I'm a planner, and I specialize in sustainable development and urban design. And I want to start with 2 short anecdotes tonight. Over the course of the lockdown, as the federal government was sending relief stimulus funds, 4 households in North Canal, using those funds and others, were able to exit North Canal and buy their own homes. I'm not sure they bought homes in Lowell, honestly. I'm not sure that that was available to them, given the affordability. And the second story I have tonight, the Harvard planning students were here this spring doing an acre neighborhood study, and they were also in Centerville. One of the community outreach strategies was to bring elders and youth together in the room to discuss the acre, their experience of the acre, growing up in the acre, et cetera. I was worried, honestly, about this strategy. I had my concerns. I didn't know how the translation would go across generations in terms of their experience of the acre. And what we heard, I couldn't have been more wrong. What we heard was, I wish I could buy a house in the acre. I wish I could stay in the acre. I love my neighborhood. I wish there were opportunities for me here for the next step of housing. 2/3 of all land in Lowell that's zoned residential is zoned single family, with a maximum lot coverage of approximately 30%. 66% of our residential land, we can only use 30% of it. 60% of Lowell households rent. And we can split hairs, sure. Some of those renters are renting single-family homes, but I think the exception actually proves the rule here. Who are we reserving this property for? And on the flip side, who are we keeping this property from? We need all kinds of housing in Lowell. We need flexible housing in Lowell. We need first-rung housing in Lowell for people who are exiting houselessness. We need transient rentals in Lowell for the tons of UMass Lowell students who come here for their 4 years and then move on. We need houses for those people to buy. We need apartments for those people to rent. We need 60% of the renting families in Lowell to have opportunities to buy homes. We need long-time property owners and homeowners who now live in $500,000, $750,000 homes in Lowell to have an affordable place to live, to have an affordable way to pay the increased taxes on their now more valuable property. You can't eat the value in your home. You can sell your home and you can leave Lowell, but you cannot live off the value in your home effectively. This is a direct result of administrative scarcity and exclusionary zoning, and it's impacting everyone in Lowell, everyone. We need to update our residential zoning. We know that. It needs to reflect the reality of the crisis. We need to increase density, we need to decrease parking requirements, and we need to enshrine this flexibility in our ordinance. Allowing ADUs, the ability for someone to build a small apartment over their garage, attached to their house, however they're going to do it, however we're going to tell them to design it. Allowing ADUs is the smallest step we can take right now to address the housing affordability crisis that is impacting everyone here. Thank you.
Sorry. If you see the stopwatch, take a few minutes, a few seconds rather, not minutes, a few seconds to wrap up, but yeah, just want to try to keep moving. Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening, City Councilors. I'm so excited that this conversation has started. My name is Dennis McCarthy. I'm born and raised in the city, 5th generation, father of 2 Sustainability Council members, Michaela Hundress McCarthy and Cormac McCarthy, and also a member of the Zoning Board for the last 11 years. I'm an architect that's been practicing for the last 32 years in the city as well. I have recently joined the Lowell Housing Choice Coalition, and I have a prepared letter to read. Dear City Councilors, the Lowell Housing Choice Coalition is requesting that the Subcommittee, Housing and Zoning, review zoning ordinance strategies that will support and enhance accessory dwelling units and inclusionary housing practices in the City of Lowell. The coalition is a group of community leaders, residents, human service professionals, and housing professionals in the City of Lowell. We believe that a strong review of the current conditions and understanding of best practices and a thoughtful housing production plan is vital. We do not expect or request quick decisions. However, we urge the city to create and review thoughtful plans that will not only generate more affordable housing in the city, but also encourage developers to produce housing with an economy of scale. Thoughtful and well-planned zoning changes can help reduce barriers to the creation of housing units that the city is sorely missing. When so many of our neighbors are paying more than half their annual income on housing alone, or priced out of the housing market entirely, we see this as a critical social justice issue. Not only that, but housing costs are preventing firms from retaining a diverse workforce, making this an acute economic development issue. When housing options are more affordable, accessible, and safe, it benefits the entire community. Thank you so much for your attention to the housing crisis. Sincerely, Lowell Housing Choice Coalition. And again, I'm just so happy that this committee was formed and we have this conversation starting tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome.
Carl Howell, Chief Program Officer at Community Teamwork. Thank you for giving me the moment to share our thoughts from Community Teamwork. 2 weeks ago, the city recognized that racism is a public health crisis and made commitments to 4 key areas: public health, socioeconomic equity, generational wealth, and education and training. 3 of these 4 key areas are impacted by the development and the quality of our housing. Housing is a fundamental component of public health. Safe, stable, and affordable housing has a strong connection to individuals' overall quality of health. So much that hospitals across the country and abroad have started investing in housing for their patients. Socioeconomic equity presents that all community members have equal status, have equal status. Oftentimes, homeowners and the wealthy shape housing ordinance, where renters and low-income household needs and perspectives are often overlooked due to the lack of privilege and status that is perceived to possess. Lastly, the generational wealth gap continues to grow. This wealth gap is created by discriminatory home ownership practices of zoning and lending for the last 100 years. Zoning ordinances can be adjusted so that development is less costly, therefore making it more affordable and attainable for lower income households. Community Teamwork is asking for the Joint Subcommittee to work closely with the skilled staff of the Department of Planning and Development, as well as housing advocates like Abundant Housing, CHAPA, and the Low Housing Choice Coalition, working together to identify zoning strategies that over time will create inclusive housing and housing options that meet the needs of the community. We believe ADUs by right are a start. However, inclusionary housing, decreased parking mandates, and multifamily by right are different tools that the subcommittee should consider and look further into. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wish to speak? Welcome.
Yeah, my name is João Vega, 2 Oxford Street, Pawtucketville. I'm just here. I don't have any run anything down, so I'm just here. The opposition. This is a bad idea for the city of Lowell. I mean, if these people live in some of the streets around the city, because the parking issue is a problem. Like my street, I have 7 houses, and everybody has a piece of land they can build. You know, they now have 10,000, but if you keep a minimum of 5,000 square feet or 6,000, they can build a dwell behind the house. So it'll be at least another 20 cars in the street. So you time it by 2. This is a bad idea. The city of Lowell doesn't need houses. It now apologize for people who live in $1 million house they work for. They deserve it to live in these single homes. At $1 million, $2 million, who cares? But they work all their lives to live in these houses. So, and they live in neighborhoods. They don't live in the city. If they want to live downtown, they would have bought downtown or bought in excuse me. They want to live in the suburbs with some space, so they can leave the street without any problem. And if you think this right now we have a problem with parking, this will create a monster. I mean, you just look at North End. People fighting every day about parking spaces, and the city of Lowell will be the same thing. So this is a bad idea. I hope this doesn't go anyway. Councils and think about this and have more people now. The cities of Lowell know about this because not too many people know about this. And I hope you guys keep inviting more people and reject this idea. It's just a bad idea. So I oppose the idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Belinda Duran, 109 Mansur Street, and I thank Councilors Drinkwater and Robinson for bringing forward this motion so that we can have this discussion. We need solutions to make housing affordable, equitable, and sustainable so that Lowell can remain a city that is diverse in every dimension, including income, race, ethnicity, age, gender identity, and architecture. ADUs are likely a part of that solution for Lowell once we fully understand what an ADU is and who will be allowed to build one and live in one and what their long-term impacts are. These subcommittees, the City Council, city departments, and boards will be successful in helping address the housing crisis and will reduce resistance to change if you help all of us learn more by providing facts and a well-thought-out plan. We residents can't educate ourselves. Looking at other cities, towns, and states doesn't provide an answer since each of them handles the ADU issue differently. And so far, the experts I've heard from and the research I've done doesn't agree either. Is an ADU less than a certain square footage? Can it add square footage to an existing structure, or must it be built within the existing footprint? Must it be occupied by a family member? Must the primary residence be owner-occupied now and in the future? Are they only intended to help current residents stay in place by allowing elderly people to pay their taxes or allowing grown children to have an independent living space? Or will they enhance diversity by attracting individuals or families into neighborhoods they otherwise couldn't afford? In short, we all need to understand more than a high-level headline. We need to understand the details of what we're discussing for Lowell, as well as the process of getting there. We need to understand the goals for allowing ADUs, the expected benefits, any unintended consequences, how those impacts will be measured over time, and whether zoning rules will evolve. I'm here to learn and to support the city in which I've put down my roots. Thank you for listening and for helping us to learn, work, and live together.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Jim Heller. I live at 54 Parkview Avenue, and I do some consulting work in the area of affordable housing. And there's one thing I think everyone in this room knows is that in this country and in Lowell, we've got a serious affordable housing issue. There's a couple of things I want to bring up, and I'm a bit of a numbers guy, but it's also the fact that this has got to be managed very carefully. From the standpoint, I took a look at some numbers from the 2020 United States Census Bureau on Middlesex County. And Lowell is actually the most populous city in Middlesex County. Much to my shock, I would have thought Cambridge had more, but Lowell is number 1 with population. It's number 7 with density. We have just under 8,100 people per square mile in the city of Lowell per the 2020 census figures. And I think this is something that's got to be thought of. And by the way, who we're basically behind is Cambridge, Somerville, Medford, Malden, and Everett, all fairly crowded places. It's difficult. I think one of the things that's got to happen, too, that has to be thought of, and if there's something that can be done with the state legislature, I took a look at some of the surrounding towns and wondering why it seems like we have a bit of a traffic problem here and parking problems here. The towns of Billerica, Chelmsford, Dracut, and Tewksbury, we've got 5 times the density that those towns have. When you take a look at Westford and Tingsboro, we're 12 times the density. Pepperell, Littleton, 15, and Groton, just to get to the extreme. We've got 23 times the density of Groton. We're going to have to take a very, very careful look at this, and I hope that it gets done very carefully with some real look at the ramifications of public safety and parking and just the ability to keep the city livable. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the chamber wishing to testify? Welcome.
Hi, Josh McCabe, 62 Fairmount Street. I just moved back about a year ago with my family. So I want to thank you for starting this discussion today. It's one of the reasons we moved back to Lowell. It's always been a very welcoming place. A lot of people have already touched on the fact that Lowell is in the middle of a housing crisis. About 50% of renters are housing burdened. About 30% of owners are housing burdened. And tackling our supply and affordability crisis, it's going to take a lot, but we know from a lot of research that ADUs are definitely a good part of that effort. So I think there's 3 reasons why they are really useful. First is that they're relatively affordable to build versus other types of housing. You've already got the land. You don't have to do so much demolition. So you can build for cheaper, and they tend to rent for just a little bit below market rate. They help households right size. I was listening to Governor Baker at a chamber event, and he said he would love to stay in Swampscott and downsize, but there was really nowhere to downsize within Swampscott. So I sometimes are concerned that we might have this issue in Lowell where people want to stay in their neighborhood, but if there's no place to downsize, you get stuck in a big house that's hard to take care of. ADUs are a good option for that. So they open up housing for seniors or empty nesters. It opens up housing for families who then get into that larger housing. And it's one of the reasons the AARP has endorsed ADUs and been a big advocate for them. And lastly, they tend to blend in with neighborhoods, right? So I know there's a lot of concerns about matching the neighborhood and ADUs. It's relatively easy to do right, where you can make it blend in with the surrounding neighborhood. And I also have 3 suggestions. I used to work in affordable housing on the North Shore, so I saw a lot of first generation, second generation, third generation ADU legislation, so there was usually a stepping stone to get it right. The first thing I would urge is that you allow them across all residential districts. I think people should have the ability to build one on their property, and people should have the ability to access new neighborhoods where they couldn't before. I think you want to make sure they're by right. With special permit processing, it can raise the cost of construction. It seems relatively easy on paper, but a lot of research suggests that if it's not by right, you potentially raise those costs. You make it a lot harder for people to build. And lastly, you want to avoid overly strict rules that have been shown to hinder ADU construction elsewhere without really addressing a lot of the underlying issues that I agree we want to make sure we take care of. So this includes rules with strict tenancy requirements for family members, onerous minimum lot size and parking requirements, and potentially owner occupancy requirements. So there's a way to get those right. You just want to make sure they're not too stringent. So I want to thank you for your time and your attention to support an issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Joseph Boyle. I live at 54 Laura Street in the Highlands. I am a former member of the Planning Board, and most relevantly, I was the city's neighborhood planner between 2001 and 2005. Rise tonight to discuss our zoning, which I had a hand in creating. Back after the comprehensive master plan was written in 2003, the Division of Planning and Development undertook a comprehensive process to rewrite our zoning. It was adopted in 2004, the city's first comprehensive review of its zoning code since the late 1960s. And I'm proud of our work. I think it was a very, very good document. We incorporated a lot of good things. But I rise tonight to emphasize that that zoning was written for a very different city. Lowell has changed a great deal in 20 years. Most especially, we didn't have a housing affordability crisis in the early 2000s. That was not one of the issues that was on their radar, and it was not one. It was not treated as a major concern when we wrote the zoning, when we changed the zoning map, when we created the different residential districts. I guess I just wish to urge you tonight not to look at the current zoning with too much deference as if it is an authority to address a set of issues which simply aren't the issues or the important issues that we're facing tonight. The city's zoning, particularly the city's residential zoning, needs to be comprehensively overhauled to take into account the fact that we're no longer a city suffering from severe disinvestment and abandonment and vacancy. Back then when we wrote the zoning, there were large areas of these cities, large areas of our neighborhoods in which property owners, rental property owners, made the decision and made the rational decision that it simply wasn't worth it to invest in their properties, even to the point of to put in the investments necessary to keep all of your rental units available. Because the rents were so low, the building values were so low, it was a dramatically different city. We need different zoning for such a different situation. Thank you.
Before we started, let me recognize Councillor John Leahy is in the chamber as well.
Yeah, there are some people on Zoom as well, Mr. Chair.
So I just want to make sure everybody who came out to the chamber has the opportunity to speak, and then I do intend to go to the folks on Zoom. Is there anyone else, member of the public in the chamber wishing to speak? All right. Seeing none, I also want to give fellow councilors and members of the subcommittees the opportunity to jump in with any comments, and then we will go to the folks who have joined by Zoom. So wanted to open up Councilor Robinson.
Thank you. Again, I'm glad to start the conversation around this. I do agree with some of the things that were mentioned. I think this is something, I think we're all aware of the shortage of housing. But I also think we have to be very, very careful and extremely thoughtful when it comes to how we look at this. Because this shouldn't be anything remotely close to open the floodgates and let someone go to Lowe's and buy a oversized shed and turn it into a ADU. I've been looking into what other communities, some language I found in other communities regarding this, and I agree. The provision to permit said use is predicated upon the need to provide consistency in the said use in terms of size, consistency with the neighborhood character, and the avoidance of inappropriate or extreme densities, which may pose a burden to the community in respect to the provision of necessary physical support systems, public safety, and diminishment of the overall quality of life. They're not intended to reduce the incidence of, they are intended to reduce the incidence of illegal conversions and to make it possible to document the number of inhabitants who are the residents. I kind of agree with that language. Some of the things through conversation with other communities, I found that they have implemented as far as language, and I think they're good points to look at. Thoughtful, well-planned, obviously. District by district, different. I mean, you can go block by block in the different worlds in some districts alone. Off-street parking, I think that's something huge. I think I keep hearing relax the parking, that piece, I'm sorry. I think the council has been discussing for quite some time ways to really provide basic levels of service, whether it's snow operations, whether it's cleaning with street sweeping, regardless. I think we need to take a hard look at off-street parking. I think these ADUs should have to be able to provide parking off-street for owner-occupied residents for the most part, is what I'm seeing a lot of other communities are doing. I think if people need to pull a permit and put in an additional driveway to make off-street parking for an ADU, what some other communities are doing, they're choosing and electing to go with permeable surface. So you're not also putting more runoff stormwater into public roadways that need to be treated, because we're struggling as is with that aspect. Other communities do single-family owner-occupied properties only, are eligible, no twos, threes, multis, and looking to do an ADU in addition to. There are size limits. I've seen some communities max them out at 1,200 square feet for an ADU on construction. Long-term leases, as was mentioned earlier, and enforcement of occupancy. So I think those are some of the things other communities have chosen to do. I think this is a good starting point for a conversation, but I think we also have to be mindful of what makes sense district by district and for the city as a whole, because yes, we need housing, but we can't sacrifice quality of life for existing residents either. So this is a fine line, but I'm glad we're starting the conversation. Thank you.
Councilor Gettier?
Before we go to the councilors, can we give the
Zoom.
people at home
Yep.
an opportunity? Because I think we're going to run out of time, and I just wouldn't want them to wait. And if council works okay with that, that's all. I just would ask that.
I appreciate that, Councilor. That's the intention, is to get to everybody, while leaving a few minutes for discussion among the committees, but before we adjourn. So, Mr. Clerk, how many residents do we have?
Read that registered through Zoom.
3 members on Zoom. Okay, residents on Zoom. At this juncture, we will continue with the members of the public wishing to speak. I just want to reiterate to please keep your comments brief. If you can limit them to 2 minutes, I think that will allow us to allow everybody the chance to speak who wishes to. So with that, Mr. Clerk, if you want to call on the residents on Zoom.
John Hamlet. He's got it on mute. You have to unmute.
Yeah, good evening. My name is John Hamlet. I live at 495 Varnum Avenue. I'm a member of the Pawtuckettville Citizens Council and a member of Lowell Housing Choice Coalition. I'm speaking tonight as a resident. I thought the initial focus was just on how to increase housing, but it is apparent that the focus is really on how to increase affordable housing. And so I'm looking at strategies that will both provide additional housing and provide additional affordable housing. And frankly, after hearing Christine and Jerry talk about the flexibility of single-family homes, having 2 kitchens, I was unaware of that. I'm losing my enthusiasm for ADUs. DPD in its housing report that it issued in March comments that ADUs are a good solution to high-cost markets. Lowell is not a high-cost market. Our housing costs are the lowest in our region. Our median price for condos is the second lowest, and the cost of rentals in Lowell is the lowest. So I'm not seeing ADUs as either a substantial number of new units, nor do I see it as affordable housing. I am far more enthusiastic about the 2 other initiatives, one that Christine talked about, and that was the zone within half a mile of the railroad that would allow for increased density and would also allow us to continue to get sources of funding for additional affordable housing. The other strategy that I like is inclusionary housing, where developers are required to designate a certain percentage. We actually have inclusionary housing under one of our special overlay zones, and so it would be easy to expand that. And it would seem to me as though you are then expanding housing opportunities and expanding housing opportunities for affordable housing. Thank you for these 2 minutes.
Thank you.
Deb Forgino. You got to unmute.
Okay. All right, so I have my 3 minutes. Let's see if I can get this in. I'll say, I am glad to live. First, I'm Deb Forgione, live in Townsend Avenue. I am also on the Housing Coalition Committee, which I enjoy. Okay, so I am glad that I live in a city that has varied and inclusive housing, and we are champions in the region. I don't think there's anyone as inclusive and as varied as the city of Lowell. And that's why a lot of people have chosen Lowell to be their home. And that's why Lowell is the city that people love to come to. And with that said, currently the housing in Lowell, it's made up of 70% attached and multifamily units, and 30% of it is single family. I'm going to ask the council to be transparent, and as you're moving forward with any kind of adjustment to the ordinances, if we're at 70-30, what is your goal? If there's 30% single family housing, I think you have to be transparent with the residents. If we're at 30%, are you looking to do 20%? Where are you looking to move the margin? So 70% is multi and attached units, and then 30% is single. If you're going to make changes, you have to be transparent and let us know what is the goal when you're done. Now, second of all, currently the city allows additional dwelling units by special permit. And in the city, without a special permit, you can definitely add in a unit in your home. You can add a suite, you can add a loved one, you can add 2 kitchens, you can have 3 kitchens. There is no way that you could prohibit anybody from having your loved one live on your property in that capacity. But turning around and changing an ordinance to add an apartment in a single family neighborhood, then you are blowing up single family. So what you're just saying is and this is a true fact, if you have 10 houses on a single family street and everybody gets to add an apartment, that's 10 houses, 10 homes with apartments. And the way that it's being peddled is you can either add it to the house or you can add it to the backyard. So now you have a street that has 10 houses with apartments. That's not single family. And I think you have to be transparent and upfront with people exactly by making an ordinance. So to sum it up, you can add housing for loved ones. And second of all, if you're going to be changing the zoning, you have to be transparent to people to let them know. So I'm asking, could you notify us in our tax bill that you plan on changing the zoning and adding this ordinance? Because most of us probably aren't even home from work. All right, so most of us aren't even home from work yet and really don't even know about this meeting. So thank you.
Thank you.
Pat Fondell.
Thank you for recognizing me and giving me the opportunity to speak. I want to come at this from a different perspective. I'm very intrigued with the concept of ADU, but wonder how much of this is really a key solution for increasing affordable housing in Lowell. Lowell is a poor city. We have a poverty rate of at least 19%, meaning at least 19% of Lowell's population are living below the poverty line. 21% of the children are living below the poverty line. That's a higher percentage than Boston and close to the poverty rate in Lawrence. And I want to know, how will changing the zoning to allow ADU construction in single-family neighborhoods affect the housing crisis for the 19% of our residents, which is a big proportion, who live in poverty? Will it help people who are poor? Will it help people find affordable rental with low incomes, who are refugees? You know, we are a city that allows refugees. What about war veterans or the homeless? And secondly, what I'd like to know is, for the homeowners who build ADUs, will they be willing to rent to refugees, to the poorest people, to low-income people, to the homeless? And so I want to know, how much do you think this really adds to the stock of affordable housing? Because that's what we're really talking about. Are we holding it up as a silver bullet to go a long way to, solving the crisis in our affordable housing solution? The problem is there's not a lot of data out there. I've been looking for studies all day yesterday and today. I've been in touch with the Planning Association of America and communicating with the Mass Landlords Association, and nobody really has a lot of data that show cities that have had ADU allowances for a while, that it has appreciably reduced the problem of affordable housing in their community. We really don't have the data. I think, it can help a bit, but again, who is it that we want to serve with these units as a solution to our crisis in affordable housing development? Lastly, I did see that in a lot of towns, a lot of cities that have changed their zoning to allow ADUs, sometimes people are not taking advantage of it when they see how incredibly expensive construction costs are. The supply chain for the building material, et cetera. So I don't think you could ramp up the amount of ADUs in any fast way to really help what is an immediate problem. It would seem to take a longer time period. But again, I wonder about the willingness of people who would like to build one to rent to those people who need. I believe in social
justice. I have to ask you to wrap up your comments.
I believe in social justice too, and I just want to make sure that these considerations and the consideration of Lowell as a city of a large percentage of poor, will we be serving them through this mechanism? And we need to look into that too.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for bearing with me as we try to move speakers along. We're just under the 6:30 deadline where we have to gavel in the city council meeting, and I do want to allow for members of the city council who are here who haven't had a chance to speak yet to speak. Hopefully, we can beg the forgiveness of the council and maybe gavel in 1 or 2 minutes late. So, Councilor Rourke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, very quickly. Thank you as well as speakers. The ADU discussion has been going on for a lengthy period of time now. It was part of my campaign when I ran for the city council, and I was successful in that campaign based upon a lot of the ADU discussions. And I look forward to what Councilor Robinson said of setting up some guidelines to be put in place. I think this can be a valuable option for the city to use. The larger zoning discussion, I think, is going to be much more lengthy and much more discussions to be taking place. But as far as the ADU goes, to have a homeowner, a property owner, to be told they have to go through a special permit process that could cost up to $10,000 and add 6 months to a year time, to something that should be by right, as long as the parameters that are set up are met, I don't think is fair to the taxpayers and those people that have invested to own a property or a home in the city of Lowell. I'll cut it off at that, and I'm sure there'll be much more discussion up forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Noon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank all the speakers here and at home. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for hosting this joint committee meeting. Everyone spoke and everyone agreed that this is an important discussion to be had and that we do have housing shortage in the city of Lowell. Not just Lowell, but just Lowell. Clearly, ADU can make a difference in closing the gap in housing option. But we must not rush into this. We have to really be thoughtful, be considerate, and incorporate all the input and concern that people have. Some suggestion that brought up by Jerry Fischette on the district by district, zoning by zoning, and looking at the parking requirement, and other two, brought up other suggestion. And I think you can rest assured that this will not be finished tonight, nor maybe the next meeting either. What I plans to do with you, Mr. Chairman, that to have DPD do a draft proposed ordinance and to have everyone have an opportunity to take a look at it and then have another meeting, maybe another meeting after that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Goodyear.
Thank you, Chairman. When we listen to some of the speakers, Mr. Fischette and others, Mr. McCarthy, they have the most experience on the zoning boards, and they made the same statements. Be careful of quick decisions. One person also said, manage very carefully. Government has never managed anything very carefully. So this is a quality of life for a lot of people, and some of the district councilors in their district have very limited space for any of this to even happen. So some people may be in favor of it because it's going to go into someone else's neighborhood. The neighborhood that I represent is largely single families, and I think that we have to be very cautious of what we're doing. I would agree there are pros and cons and benefits, but when you start looking at just changing something to change it because we're trying to do something else, it normally doesn't favor the people who worked extremely hard for some of the things that they have. Myself included, I bought a home because of the space that I have, and there's not a lot of space. If my neighbor put on an in-law or something like that, I would be moving because we're already tight and condensed, and it's not very condensed like some of the neighborhoods when you look at the Acre or you look at Lower Centerville in some of the areas. So I just would agree with a lot of the speakers, be very cautious on the decisions. There's a lot of people up here who have there's some special interest into the statements that they're making. So I just would be very cautious in what we're trying to do to other people's neighborhoods and try to get at least notification out to them so they can come in and understand exactly what's happening. I just would ask that Christine McCall would outline at some point the availability in the properties within each district that is available for something like an ADU, because when you look at some of the parking, I heard one person say, let's decrease parking requirements. That's totally crazy in this city. We already can't get fire trucks, fire apparatus into areas. We already can't plow streets. We already can't get cars to move off of streets. And the excuse we always hear is that people have no parking to put their cars. They can't get down to the parking garages. So there's a lot of moving pieces, and I just agree with a lot of the speakers that said be very cautious. And I'm not saying that throw away this whole idea. I'm just saying that we should be very cautious. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. And I just want to add, I appreciate everyone who came out to speak tonight. And speaking as somebody who, along with Counselor Robbins, who brought forward this motion that's being discussed here tonight, and who does think a policy or a change to the zoning ordinance that would allow accessory dwelling units by right would be a good thing. I want to say I agree and appreciate with everyone who urged this council to move forward with caution and to take our time. And I can tell you that that is the intention. I think this was a first step tonight to begin discussing this issue. And I think you will see this joint subcommittee meeting a number of more times to dig into a lot of these issues, such as dimensional requirements, such as parking, square footage requirements, short-term rentals, which I want to say I don't think at all should be allowed as part of these additional dwellings. And I believe what we will see and what we're all aiming for is something that's incremental, not overwhelming. So I agree with everyone who urged us to be to take this slow and cautiously, and I can say from the chair that it is our intention to do so. With that, I would like to move that we request from the Division of Planning Development a draft ordinance that we can begin to work off of and start to tackle some of these issues, through this joint subcommittee. So I think if we could take a look at what a draft ordinance may look like and start to go, issue by issue, I think that would be a productive way to move forward. So I will, make that in the form of a motion.
I'll second it, Mr. Chairman.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Clerk, call the roll.
Yes.
Counsel Drinkwater.
Yes.
Counsel Noon.
Yes.
Counsel Leahy.
Thank you. With that, we've stolen 5 minutes from the city council meeting, and I don't want to prolong this any longer as we have a long night ahead of us. Given that there will be a lot more discussion through this joint subcommittee, I would ask for a motion to continue this meeting to a later date.
I second it.
Okay. Moved and seconded. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Motion will be continued to a later date. Thank you, everyone, for attending.